Okay, Jim, would you like to open in prayer?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we just thank you that we can come here and study your word, Lord. Just thank you for Jacob studying to teach us too, Lord. And we just watch over our kids and grandkids and protect them physically and spiritually. And just prepare our hearts and our minds as we look into your word about Esther, Lord. We ask this in the Son's holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Quick little review about Haman from last week. All the text is right there in the notes if you want to just follow along there. Joyce, would you like to read that first little paragraph there?
Haman sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh to join him. Then Haman described for them his glorious wealth and his many sons. He told them all about He told them all how the king had honored him and promoted him in the rank over the other officials and the loyal staff. What's more, Haman added, Queen Esther invited no one but me to join the king at a banquet she had prepared. I am invited again tomorrow to join her and the king. Still none of this satisfied me. I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate all the time. Why does Mordecai lack the fear and honor?
Well, yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
That red means I put that in there. It's not
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to differentiate between my question and the thing. So he brags about all that stuff, but it doesn't satisfy him. All that stuff he has to brag about because he sees Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. So why does Mordecai's lack of fear and honor, Mordecai doesn't fear him, doesn't bow down to him, why does that bother him so much?
He wants to be honored.
Yes, that's his driving motivation. Good. And why does it bother him specifically that it's Mordecai?
He's Jewish.
Yes, he's Jewish, and I don't know if you guys were here when we talked about this, but Mordecai's a eunuch. And so Haman considers him not even a real man. So in Haman's mind, compared to my position, I'm the highest official, number 2 in the whole country, the whole empire, the whole world. Compared to my position, he's nobody. And he's going to dishonor me? Well, not even dishonor him, but just not honor him. You know the difference? You can dishonor someone, and you can do nothing, and you can honor them. And Mordecai's just doing nothing. But it bothers him so much. So that shows us that honor and position have become Haman's identity.
Yep.
That's what he sees himself. If he asks himself, who am I? I'm an important person. I'm a person that people respect. That's what the most important thing to himself. Okay, let's move on to chapter 6, starting in verse 6 through 14. Jim, would you like to read those verses?
Okay. Haman entered, and the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king wants to honor? Haman thought to himself, who is it the king would want to honor more than me? Haman told the king, for the man the king wants to honor, have him bring a royal garment that the king himself has worn, and the horse the king himself has ridden, which has a royal crown on his head. Put the garment and the horse under the charge of one of the king's most noble officials. Have them clothe the man the king wants to honor, parade him on a horse through the city square, and proclaim before him, this is what is done for the man the king wants to honor.
Okay, so this here is the center of the book, what you just read. The book is arranged with this as the very center. It's the turning point of the whole book, this little conversation. Now, that center section actually should include verse 10, but before we move on to that, I want to talk about these verses. The word horse is used a lot of times in this, and garment. And both those words come up a lot in this book, the idea of horses and the idea of garments and robes. Esther wearing the royal robes when she's crowned, and later Mordecai getting royal robes. Just if you read through the book and you just highlight every time it says robes or clothing. Oh, remember Mordecai tearing his robes, wearing the sackcloth. Esther sends him new robes, but he won't put them on. It talks about robes a lot. And this, at the center, both of those themes come together. So a garment is a symbol of identity, and status, and position. Those three things. Maybe more than that, but definitely those things. That's why people would have their robes dyed purple. Does anyone know why purple was?
Authority?
Royalty.
Yeah, but does anyone know why purple is royalty?
I don't.
Because,
I know Lydia was the,
yeah, it was so expensive. The only way you could get purple dye was from a certain type of oyster or something. And so it was very difficult. So, because it was so difficult to get, that made it really expensive. And because it was so expensive, that was a way to show off your wealth. They're like, oh wow, that person's wearing purple, they must be so rich. Right? Yeah, so when you wear that, it shows I'm somebody important. And a horse is a symbol of power. Horses are strong. Horses are useful because they allow you to travel faster. So also control, because a horse is so much stronger than a human, but the human can control the horse.
now were were horses available to everybody or just certain ones?
That's a good question. You couldn't plow with a horse in ancient times because a horse, since then they have invented a type of harness that a horse can wear and not get hurt, because horses have that whatever, and so an old yoke would cut into that, so you couldn't plow with a horse. So yeah, a poor person would probably have an ox, or a regular person to plow their field, or a pair of oxen to plow their fields. You probably typically only get a horse when you get into like official business.
So would that also be a symbol of wealth?
Yeah, it might be, but it's definitely connected to at least in this case, is connected to the king because he sends out all these couriers on mounted horses and they ride to the far ends of the empire. And it talks, later in the book it talks about they rode fast horses that were especially bred for the king, or some translations say sired by the royal stud. So these were ones that they carefully bred with the strongest, fastest horse.
They were probably a symbol of beauty, I don't know, a symbol, but they were probably beautiful horses. If they were at a certain breed.
Yeah, I don't know if they thought about it like that, but I think it was a symbol of masculinity
Yeah.
because of the strength and
That's true.
the virility of the horses. I mean, I don't know how much you know about horse breeding, but if you, let's say you've got 50 mares and you want to have more horses, you only need one stallion out in your pasture during the mating season, and by the next year, every single one of them will have a baby.
Yeah.
So they were a symbol of virility and masculinity, which is really important in this book when you have the king who's got like 1,000 wives and all these eunuchs who can't have a wife. This book is full of that. And especially when one of the major characters, Mordecai's a eunuch. So a horse is considered a power and control, because a weak human can control a strong horse and masculinity. Now, here's the irony of this little passage. Verse 8, what does the end of verse 8 say? Well, let's just read the whole thing. Ruth, could you read verse 8?
Have them bring a royal garment that the king himself has worn, and a horse the king himself has ridden, which has a royal crown on its head.
So who's wearing the royal crown here?
Well, it sounds like the horse is too.
The horse. The horse is wearing the crown. The irony there is that the horse is crowned. So think about the king, who's very powerful, right?
Yeah.
And he's wearing a crown, and he's very masculine, and has lots of wives, and had sex with hundreds, or at least hundreds, probably thousands of them. And yet, guess what? There's always someone else pulling the reins on the king. Okay, let's move on, because we really want to get to the importance. So that's Haman's idea of honor. This is all about honor, the garment and the horse. And then the last verse of that section is verse 10. Joyce, could you read verse 10?
The king told Haman, "Hurry and do just as you propose. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai, the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you have suggested." So Haman took the garment.
Okay, wait, hey, hold on.
Okay.
So that's the last verse of the center of the book. That center section is where Haman and the king are in the king's bedroom talking about this. That conversation. And you see how that's a big turning point. He's like, I want to honor someone. This is what you should do. He thinks it's going to be him. Do this and this and this and this. And it's all the major themes come together right there. With the honor and the pride and the who's important and somebody else leading that person. All that stuff. And then the king says, good idea. do it for Mordecai the Jew. So that is a big pivot, a big, there's a fancy word for that I can't think of right now. It starts with a P, but it means that the unexpected thing happens. The story was building towards, up until now, the story was building towards what?
Hammond having himself under.
Yeah, Haman killing a whole race of people. And all of a sudden, right here, the story shifts. And from this point on, it's like Haman, and then all of a sudden it starts to go down. And Haman...
He felt they don't think that he was gonna get it. Felt like getting
Yeah.
stuck.
And then
Yeah.
Haman got a slap in the
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah, and it describes that. Jim, you want to read 11 and 12?
So Haman took the garment and the horse he clothed Mordecai and paraded him to the city square, crying out before him, "This is what is done for the man whom the king wants to honor." Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried out for home, mournful and with his head covered.
So, all this shame now.
Big shame.
Yeah. So we need to talk about this guy, Mordecai, who's so filled with pride. He just assumes that it's going to be about him. He's so full of pride and so needy of honor. He's very insecure. And his shame. Now, would Haman have been ashamed to perform this honor for the king?
No.
No.
No?
He wouldn't. So it's not the act of leading someone around and honoring them that is so shameful to him. But this is so shameful and so devastating. Why? Why is this so devastating for him to do it for Mordecai?
We know he told his wife and his
Yeah.
family, "King said be there, I'm gonna do this," he's already told, now he's gonna go home and say, "No, it was Mordecai,"
Well, and not just, you're right, that's exactly right. And not just his wife and family though, who else?
His sons, I'm sure a
The
lot of
Jewish
people.
race, right? With Jewish people?
Yeah, but you remember the whole thing started with all the important guys, the officials, sitting at the king's gate,
Well, yeah.
and Mordecai won't bow down. There must be a number of men there that at first Haman doesn't even notice, and they come and they say, "Why aren't you following the rule? You're not bowing down. That's illegal. You're not." He's like, "I'm not going to bow down to that guy," whatever. For whatever reason, Mordecai doesn't. And then they go, "Hey, is that okay for him to not bow down to you?" And he's like, really mad. And then next thing they know, all those officials, next thing they know, Mordecai the Jew won't bow down to him. Next day, proclamation, every Jew in the world's going to die. Those guys all say, "Whoa, Haman is powerful."
I never thought of that.
That Mordecai dishonored him, and now Mordecai and everybody of his nationality is going to die.
Do that.
Yeah. So, all those officials, they all know, and all their families, they went home. You hear that proclamation? The whole city, the whole empire, the whole world is talking about it. And all those guys go, "You know why that is? Because Mordecai the Jew wouldn't bow down to Haman." So Haman's getting back at him and all those people. They're all talking about it. Now they all know how much he hates him. Now all of a sudden everybody in the city sees Haman leading Mordecai along, saying, "This is what is done for the man the king wants to honor. This guy's great," essentially, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's shameful because everybody knows he does not want to be doing that. He hates that guy. Oh, that must be so embarrassing for him.
No wonder he covered his head.
Yeah, but that's the great irony of it. If he hadn't been so proud, it wouldn't have been a humiliating thing. That's why he says his pride caused his humiliation. That's what those blanks are. If he's so devastated that it's him because he thinks he's so far above him. He's so far above Mordecai that to have to honor this Jewish man, this eunuch, to have to honor him is devastating. If he had just been okay, he has all these honors and all this wealth and everything anyone could possibly want. If he could have just been okay with that one little thing, my life is great. There is one annoying guy at the gate, but like, you can't complain. You can't have everybody in the world loving me. If he could have just been okay with that, then when he's leading them around, everybody, what would their reaction be? They wouldn't be like, oh my word! He has to, they'd just be like, oh wow, okay, so the king wants to honor Mordecai. That's fine, that's great. It wouldn't have been embarrassing.
Right.
But he couldn't even think in that direction,
No.
because he was so into himself.
Yeah. And his pride on a number of levels causes this. Many levels. 2 more levels. If he hadn't just assumed it was about him, he probably wouldn't have said this. Because look what he said back up in verse 9. He said, verse 9, put the garment and the horse in the charge of one of the king's most noble officials. If it was talking about anybody else, he would assume that's going to be me. If I say that, he'll get me to do it. Because I am the king's most noble official. So, but because he's so sure it's him, he's thinking like this. Okay, so here's the king, and then here's his officials. His number 1 official, his number 2, his number 3, his number 4. He's thinking, if the number 2 guy, I'm the number 1 guy for the king. If the number 2 guy has to do that for me, that puts more of a space. That puts me, it's like this, number 1, then number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And they're pretty much all equal, but because the number 2 guy has to do that. So it's going to, in the eyes of his social circles, it's going to elevate him more. But that's all because he assumes he's going to be the one honored. If he had thought for a second, this could be somebody else, it might be me, but it could be somebody else, I better not say have the most noble, because then it might be me.
Yeah.
I might have to do it for one of my colleagues, and all of a sudden they're ahead of me. He never dreamed to be for his worst enemy. So his pride caused it because he had made such a big deal about a huge deal. He turned it into a national security threat because of his pride. That Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. Also, because he just assumed the king wanted to honor him. Also, one last reason why his pride causes humiliation. If he didn't have his identity so tightly wrapped up with honor and respect, it wouldn't have hurt him so much. If he'd been like, my life is about my family and my job and serving my God, whatever God he worshipped, it wasn't the God of the Bible. And also, I'm respected in the community, and I really like training my boys. If he had more things to who he was, then when one of them was taken away, it's like, oh wow, that's embarrassing, but I can still go home to my family and my wife will comfort me. That happened earlier, when he went home and everything was good, and his wife, he's like, I'm not satisfied, and his wife stroked his ego and comforted him.
But he had no compassion for others at all.
At all.
And was it before this that he built the tower to hang Mordecai on?
Yes.
Now he's got to go home and say, oh, we can't do that,
But he was so sure because he was the only one that was at the banquet with the queen.
Yeah.
He says, it's gotta be me,
Yeah. So if he hadn't wasn't so wrapped up in all his honor, wanting honor, he wouldn't have been crushed when this happens. In fact, it seems like whenever someone gets totally wrapped up in one thing, that thing is taken from them.
It's a disaster.
In this case, immediately, he's so wrapped up in honor, his honor is what's taken. He doesn't lose his money, he loses his honor.
To him, that probably meant more.
Oh yeah, yeah. So there's an important life application that we'll talk about more in a minute, but I just want to mention it just now. When you let yourself become all about one thing, that thing will destroy you. And it happens with success, or money, or your children. Some people completely wrapped up, and their child is their whole world. For some people, it's romance. For some people, it's their looks. For some people, it's their abilities. Maybe some people, it's their athleticism. Maybe some people, it's their intelligence. And it could be anything. If you let that become everything to you, two things will happen. One, you'll lose it. And two, it will destroy you. In a way, life, once you become an adult, life is a series of losing things. I mean, I remember when I used to have a super good memory. I could read something 3 times, like a paragraph, read it 3 times and I have it memorized. That was really great. It was very useful in high school. I passed a lot of tests because of that. I don't have that memory anymore. It's gone.
I can read a paragraph you asked me to read, and I look.
Over many
I go, read it again.
Yeah. Well, it's becoming, it's moving in that direction for me.
You still got time, Jacob.
I still got time, but, so I'm okay. But I'm only gonna lose more of it, and more of it, and more of it, until eventually, probably I won't know where I am, or who I am. I mean, that's one thing. What else do you lose? You lose your health, you lose your looks, you lose your family, you lose your abilities, you lose your independence. Eventually you lose your life. You just lose things.
It could just be anything.
You lose everything in this world. There are some things that you can never lose. But all those things are things of a different world. But everything in this world you'll lose. Guess what? If you have a lot of money, if you're a billionaire, when you die, you lose it all.
Yeah.
Somebody else gets it. But if you have treasure somewhere else, or if you have what matters to you somewhere else, you can't lose that. If you're wrapped up in a relationship with your child or with your spouse or something like that, you will lose those relationships. But there's one relationship that you will never lose.
Your treasure's in heaven.
Yes, I've had the same thing, yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
That's a good retirement up there.
Yes, very good.
So we're gonna need to move on, but that's just a super important lesson from this book. All right, starting in verse 13, we're still in chapter 6. Ruth, could you read 13 and 14?
Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai is Jewish, and you have begun to fall before him, you want to overcome him, because your downfall is certain." While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and rushed Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared.
We all know what happens at the second banquet, right? Okay, so of the 3 wives in this story, who are the 3 wives that we hear about?
Vashti, Esther, and now Zeresh.
Yes. We know the least about Zeresh,
Yeah.
but there are at least 6 things we do know about her. The first one is that she is pagan. Her husband obviously believes in portents and omens and signs from the gods. You remember about the pur rolling the dice to pick the day? Remember how he said he's so impatient?
Yes.
Why does he have to wait 11 months for his edict to happen?
He wanted it now.
He did want it now, but why does he choose that date 11 months in the future? Because, oh, this is not gonna, because he rolls these dice.
The dice. And that's what it came up?
What, yeah, what were dice used for in the ancient times?
It's still gambling to determine
It wasn't
person.
the same, that was, but the main purpose was to determine the will of the gods.
Oh,
It was for divination.
okay.
So, anybody ever see Moby Dick, the old Gregory Peck one?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember I forget the guy's name, the big guy who was always throwing these,
Yeah, I don't know.
he was something where he'd throw these little bones and stones down, they'd land in a different shape, and then all of a sudden he sees one that means, it's like a tarot cards, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like some sign from above. So that's the kind of family Zeresh is in, that believes in that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
omens and whatnot. That's one. Number 2, she knows how to stroke his ego. Because the last time, just before the whole fiasco with the leading his enemy on a horse, he said, I don't have any satisfaction. She said, well, why don't you just build a big pointy spike, and put your enemy on it, and then you can go and enjoy the next banquet. Because you deserve that, honey. If he won't honor you, he should die, because you're so great. So, number 2, she knows how to stroke his ego. Number 3, she knows that when he's dishonored, he's dangerous. Okay, so she knows that he just had a race of people put on death row. And also, bear in mind, there was no kind of spousal abuse laws back then. So, in fact, the law was that every man was master of his own home. That law had just gone out in chapter 1. So he can do whatever he wants in his home. But, surprisingly, even though she knows that, surprisingly, she doesn't bother to avoid displeasing him now. She was very careful to please him a chapter ago.
But not at that time, you're saying.
Yeah, she could have stroked his ego and said, I know that's sad, honey, but don't worry, you'll get him. He'll die, in 11 months. It'll be okay. She doesn't say any of that. What does she say? In verse 13.
She knows his fate has been sealed, kind of.
Yeah, your downfall is certain.
Yeah.
And so she says, your downfall is certain. That probably doesn't make him happy.
No.
But
She knows she's gonna lose everything.
why is she unafraid to displease him?
Maybe she was, I don't know.
Well, if she says, you're going down, and then he doesn't go down, then she's in trouble.
Yeah.
But if she says, you're going down, and he does, then it doesn't make much difference. Right?
Yeah.
So she must be really, really positive, certain that he is going down. You see what I'm saying? Because if she's wrong, she's going to be in big trouble. So the point is, she deeply believes what she's saying there. She's not just saying it. There's lots of times in this book when people just say something, but they don't mean it. And this time, she is so certain of his downfall. She really believes what she's saying. And then number 6, what makes her so certain? How can she be so sure that he's going to go down just because he had to honor this other guy? I mean, within 24 hours he'll be dead. But that's what will happen in the story. But how can she be so certain that he's... Because such a complete reversal that was so sudden and so unforeseen and so unlikely, completely improbable. I don't know if you remember me talking last week about how it just so happened that the king couldn't sleep. It just so happened that he asked for the Chronicles. It just so happened that they opened to a page 5 years previous when Mordecai saved his life. It just so happened that when he asked for advice, he's like, who's here? I need to ask what I should do for this guy. It happened to be Haman. It just so happened that the king worded the question. He didn't say, what should I do for Mordecai the Jew? He says, what should I do for someone I want to honor? It just so happened that he suggested use one of your top officials. All these little things just lined up just perfectly.
But not totally naming him.
What did you say?
Not totally naming him, right?
Who?
Haman. You said that he would, to honor one of his top officials.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought it was him.
Yeah.
So these things that, the
They
way he worded.
just
stuff,
happened to work out. She's sure that because of all that, and also it has clear poetic justice. You know what poetic justice is?
Not in something like this.
It's like karma.
Well, okay.
You know?
Well, yeah.
Like justice is like, you know, if your kid says a bad word, you give him a spanking. Poetic justice is like, because you said a bad word, I'm going to put soap in your mouth. It's like so fitting.
Yeah.
You had a dirty word in your mouth, so I'm going to put soap in your mouth. That's what,
Yeah.
okay? Perfect. This is so fitting because the man that he is trying to wipe out his whole people because he didn't bow down to him, like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
She knows it's wrong, and now he's going to triumph over you. Like, all these things, it's so improbable, it's so sudden, it's such a complete reversal, and it's so poetic justice. She says it must be divine. She
So-
believes in omens from the gods, remember. And so when she sees this happen, she's like, oh, the gods are going to get you. They do not like what you planned to wipe out a race of people.
So she believes in omens, that this is going to happen. That's what made her so certain.
Yeah, she's so, when she sees this happening, she's like, this has the fingerprints of a god on it. This is not just, oh, it's just a coincidence, right?
Too many coincidences.
Right? Like if you were like, I'm going to give money to somebody. You say, I'm going to give $1,000 to this person in the phone book. And it happens to be the name of your worst enemy. Right? She's like, okay, maybe one coincidence. But there's just a whole string. She's like, this is the work of a god. This is not just a coincidence. So it must be divine. Okay. Let's see.
Which also has clear, what?
Poetic justice. Joyce, could you read verses 1 and 2 of chapter 7?
Okay. The king and Haman came, the king and Haman came to the feast with Esther the queen. Once again, on the second day, while drinking wine, the king asked Esther, Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you. Whatever you seek, even half of my kingdom will be done.
Okay, so we never talked about why 2 banquets. But the reason why she has to do these 2 banquets is very complicated. I don't understand all of it, but it's very purposeful. She's being super careful and planning this out. Why does she have to be so careful here?
I think she really had to feel the way of how it's going to go with the first one. Can she,
Okay.
Prepping.
Yes, I see what you're saying, and I think that's right. That's part of it. But what I mean is, she has to. If you're saying she has to like feel it out and see how it's gonna go, that means she's being very cautious. I'll have one banquet and see how it goes,
Yeah.
so that I can plan out. And on the second banquet, I'll know just how to word it. And she actually does word it differently. Anyway, that's not my point. My point is, the reason that she has to be so careful is because this is a very delicate thing she has to do. If she doesn't do this just right, it could blow up in her face. Because, number one, she has to, let's see, she has to save all the Jews, not just her. This could go down like this. Your Majesty, I'm actually a Jew, and that whole law about killing all the Jews is not good. And he's like, oh, you know what? I'll just add to it. I'll say all the Jews die, but unless you happen to be married to the emperor, then you're okay. It could go down that way. The king manages somehow to just exclude her from it. Right?
I suppose she doesn't really know if he likes Jews or hates them too, so she's taking that chance.
Yeah, by reviewing, yes.
They'll get rid of you too.
because
yeah.
right now it's based on her.
It could, yeah, and it could go this way. Well, you should have told me you were a Jew. I never would have married you if I'd have found out. It could go that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So she has to make, she's got to, 1, save all the Jews, not just herself. 2, she's got to get the king to act, Xerxes to act swiftly before Haman can persuade him otherwise. Because we all know the king just does whatever people around him persuade him to do. So if she's like, my petition is this, please undo that decree where all the Jews die. And he's like, okay, well, let me think about it for a month. We got time. You know that Haman could come up with some plan to persuade the king. King, she's only 1 out of your 1,000 wives, or something. So she needs to get him to act swiftly. She also, this is the most delicate of all, she needs to incriminate Haman without incriminating the king.
Yeah.
That's going to be really tricky because they did it together and the king sealed it. It would be like, if me and Salem, me and my son, were out playing and jumping in mud puddles together. And then I came in, if my wife wanted to yell at him, but be respectful to me, how could she do that? That'd be really tricky.
No, because Salem's going to say, how come you didn't?
Yeah.
Well,
He was with me.
Yeah, I know, but like, it'd be very, now, my wife probably just yelled at both of us. But if she were trying to be respectful to me, but yell at my son, she'd have to really have a careful plan.
Yeah.
She'd have to be something like, Salem, Daddy's a grown man. If he wants to jump in mud puddles, he's allowed. But you are a boy and I told you not to. But even that wouldn't really be okay because he would say, yeah, you told me not to, but Daddy told me to. Right? So it's super tricky. This is gonna be, she has to come up with a very careful plan. And lastly, there's a question mark here, because I'm not positive of this, but I think she's also trying to not appear to be manipulating him.
Makes sense.
Um,
The king you're talking.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's trying, so, let's see how she does it. Ruth, do you want to read 3 and 4?
Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor in your eyes, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life, this is my request, and spare my people, this is my desire."
Okay, hold on right there. That's the first one. Because if you look up in 7:2, what the king says, he says, Queen Esther, whatever you ask,
Yeah.
you will be given. Whatever you seek will be done. The words he says for ask and seek are the words with request and desire. Let's see here.
Well, he left that statement wide open. Even half my king.
Yeah, that's a.
Yeah, well, that was a common, not a euphemism, but like a hyperbole.
Yeah.
But he says, what's your request, what's your desire? In his mind, it's one and the same thing. Just two different words for it. And she takes that opportunity to say, my request is my life and my desire is my people. So she's effectively putting it all in one basket. Me and the Jews, both. That's my petition. Okay? Okay, go ahead, Ruth, and finish up.
For my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and extermination. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent. Indeed, the trouble wouldn't be worth burdening the king. King Ahasuerus.
Oh, that's fine. Just stop right there. So, she's very careful to be,
She chooses her words.
yeah, super careful to be deferent to him. If I found favor, and if the king is pleased, spare my life and my people. We've been sold to destruction, death, and extermination. If we'd merely been sold as slaves, I wouldn't want to bother you with that. Now that's true because they had been sold as slaves. That's why they're in Persia in the first place. I don't know if you remember.
I was just thinking, do you think she was thinking about Vashti? I mean, she didn't obey the king and she got tossed out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I better not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no wonder she was cautious and careful.
Yes. Definitely. And now she uses actually an actual quote from the decree. If you remember, Mordecai sent her a copy of the decree, and it used that exact phrase: destruction, death, and extermination.
Yeah.
Now, the king apparently never read the actual decree because it doesn't seem to ring a bell. It just is like, he just knew, he's like, yeah, here's my ring, go make it happen. Because hearing the actual quote from it doesn't ring a bell. Now, this is tricky because it is the king who sold them. He got like something like 1,000 pounds of silver, or a certain amount. He sold them for that. Now, notice what she did. She didn't say, you and Haman did this. She put it in the passive tense, so she doesn't have to say who did it yet. She's like, I just want my life and my people. We've been sold to destruction, death, and extermination. And so the king, in verse 5, Ahasuerus spoke up and asked Queen Esther, who is this? And where is the one who would devise such a scheme? So by saying, here's my request, somebody is trying to kill me and my people. See how she hides? The way she words it, she doesn't tell who did it.
Yeah.
And so then he asked, he's already mad, who is it? And I think she was trying to get him to ask that so she could point very clearly, it's him.
Yeah.
It's this vile Haman. So she's trying to separate the guilt between the king and Haman. And then verse 7, Joyce, could you read verse 7?
The king arose in anger and went from where they were drinking wine to a palace, to the palace garden.
Yeah. What do you think could be going on in the king's mind while he's out in the garden?
You're probably just interested in drinking.
Well, he's obviously angry.
Well, he is angry though, but
Super
still.
angry. But the king,
Haman took advantage of him when he wanted to do this, you know.
yeah.
I don't think he told the king what he was going to do. And the king signed it to do it, you know.
Yeah, and he's like, what? You mean that group of people you wanted to kill was my wife? Was one of them?
Yeah.
The queen? You never told me that.
Yeah.
Of course, Haman didn't know that, but the king's mad. But it's tricky because two reasons.
You think he knew, had to know? I mean,
Oh, Haman didn't
She-
know.
that she was
Oh no, I
a
don't think he knew.
Jew?
No,
Haman didn't know?
no.
But Mordecai,
I mean, just think, just the night before, he was bragging about spending time with the king and queen.
yeah.
He's like, I hate those Jews, but I got to spend time with the king and queen. That's why it's told very carefully that she hid her ethnicity.
Yeah.
So they didn't realize she had a relationship with, when she sent him clothes and,
They didn't realize, remember that happened outside the gates,
yeah.
not in the palace complex, because he couldn't come in.
Cause
And-
that's when she had the eunuchs take it out to him.
Yeah, and also if, Mordecai would have had access to communicate to her where the eunuchs could go, where Haman couldn't go those places. Even though he was more powerful, only eunuchs were allowed to go within 7 steps of the queen.
So-
Even publicly, you had to stay, every man had to stay 7 steps away from the queen or any of the concubines. Only eunuchs could go near them.
So the first time he hears that she is a Jew and they're her people, that's the first time she heard
Yeah.
it. And he sees
Yeah.
the reaction of the king.
Yeah, both of them, both the king and Haman are surprised. Now, I'm sure lots of the servants knew what was going on, and lots of the eunuchs knew. She must have some connection with Mordecai the Jew.
So
But they didn't.
that's why they were mad. That's why he rose in anger, because he found out that she was a Jew.
No.
I don't think he wanted to
No.
be associated, people know that he was associated, having him killed.
Okay, what did I miss here?
He's mad because Haman tricked him
Yeah.
into
Signing that thing.
signing a decree that will kill his own queen.
Yeah.
Right. He's already lost one beautiful queen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's gonna lose another one.
yeah. I mean, he's got plenty, but
Well, yeah.
but Esther's his favorite. So he's out in the garden. We don't know what's going on in his mind, but he definitely has some things to think about. A, how can I revoke an irrevocable law?
Yeah.
Yeah.
B, how can I punish Haman for something I okayed?
And still
Yeah.
look like
Right?
the king.
Yeah, come on.
Like, it's like my kids when I'm like, hey, you can't do that, Mommy said I could. Well, I can't punish them now. Because if I'm mad at someone, I need to be mad at her for giving them permission. So he's like, if I'm mad at someone, I gotta be mad at myself because I'm the one who okayed this. I should have asked. What group of people am I killing?
Time off, Mom and I have to talk.
Yeah. So,
Been there, done it.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are lots of times.
so, Jim, can you read the end of 7 and 8?
Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on a couch where Esther was reclining.
Okay, so why does Haman beg Esther and not Xerxes?
Because he knew that she had the control over the king
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah, he listened to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if someone's trying to trample you with a chariot, you don't beg the horse, you beg the
Yeah.
driver.
Yeah.
Yes, so the irony of all this is that this whole thing started because this Jew wouldn't bow down to him. And it all ends with him bowing down to a Jew. And a woman, no less. That's the last act, the last choice he makes is to fall down in front of a Jewish woman and beg. Probably on his knees. Now, that ends up being very convenient for him because he's like, oh good, he broke that law about 7 steps. Now I can have him arrested, because I wasn't sure what to do, but now I can have him arrested for violating the queen. You're not allowed to get that close to her. So, the significance here, let's just real quickly, we have about a minute, if that, to get to the application. How do we avoid being Haman? How do we avoid being like him?
Truthful.
Yeah, realize the truth. And Haman was proud and didn't know he was proud. So step 1 is realize that you are proud. Your pride might be not in your wealth or something. It might be in how good of a Christian you are, or how many times you come to church. It could be in anything. But almost everyone in this world is very proud about something. Sometimes they're proud about how not proud they are. You know? Okay. And that is if you realize that, you're gonna realize, wow, I am a proud, arrogant person, and I'm not a good person, because that's a sin. Number 2, Haman's identity was bound up with human honor and position. So when he loses it, he falls apart. So we need to realize that it's an extreme temptation to seek human honor. We might not even know that we're doing it. You know, as you preach a sermon for the Lord and someone says, hey, great job, you're a great preacher. And then the next time, without even realizing it, you're doing it for the Lord, but you're also doing it for that recognition. Or maybe it's, the way you cook. You know, you're cooking a meal for somebody, you just want to be nice, and then they say, wow, you're an amazing cook. And you're liking that recognition. It's that's a temptation, you know. And number 4, it's actually, realize the extreme temptation to seek anything other than God. Because whatever you put your roots into, whatever you put your identity into, you will lose that thing and it will be your undoing. If you put your identity in anything other than Jesus Christ, God the Father, and the fact that He loves you and that's all that matters, you're gonna
You're gonna fall.
fall. You will lose everything in this world. Last line, being a Christian, a child of God, means this. You can lose anything in this world and be okay. Because that is very sad, I lost my retirement account. But you know what? God loves me.
God provides.
Yes.
That is true.
You can. It will still hurt.
Yeah.
It will still hurt. But you will not be destroyed by it.
I was thinking, what were you thinking?
Oh, we lost everything in ours.
Oh, yeah, no, but I was thinking about the kids years ago when, you know, you hope and pray that they're gonna behave themselves, you know, when you go to church, and you never know how it's gonna turn out. And, you know, and then someone will come up and say, oh, your children are so well behaved. And about the time somebody says that,
And look out.
you know, then look out. And I told Jim, I said, we have got to remember, all the honor and glory goes to God. It's not on me at all. Oh, that just makes me
And
laugh.
the most important thing too, don't look back.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Satan can,
Oh.
he'll get me in that something, I'll look back. No, and that's done.
And that's so easy to do.
Yeah,
What do you mean by look back?
well,
Go back and have regrets.
Yeah.
Wish I done that.
Yeah,
I should have done
I
this
should have
instead
done
of
this,
that.
or if
Yeah,
only
like
I
I-
had done that.
I had all my stock in the company,
Yeah.
plus communications was like Enron. lost
Woulda, coulda,
everything.
shoulda.
And I said, no,
Yeah.
why? And she kept telling me, invest biblically, which I should have, with gold and silver. And, but you keep looking back, why didn't I do that? It's done with, you know, and God's taking care of it, we can't complain. He's taking care of us, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. There is a verse about diversifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
And another, you know,
God provides.
He sure did.
He always does.
and you know another thing that some people, their God is the past. They're living in the past.
Yes.
Boy, yeah, it's,
Yeah.
You know, the
And
good old
that's-
days.
And
And
that's
that's
sad.
all they think about. It is sad. And some people, their God is living in the future. You know, someday when I have my own this or my own that, you know, someday when I can afford to blah, 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 or when,
It's like, no.
I think they're like